Erwin Rommel, the legendary Desert Fox, seemed unstoppable as his Afrikakorps blazed through North Africa, outmaneuvering the Allies at every turn. But no matter how brilliant a commander might be, even the best-laid plans can fall to a carefully crafted strategy. This is the Mastermind strategy that completely wrecked Rommel, an extraordinary combination of cunning tactics, relentless determination, and moments of sheer audacity that turned the tide of war in the unforgiving sands of the desert. The North African campaign of World War II was a defining moment in the conflict, where strategy, grit, and deception played crucial roles. One of the central figures in this campaign was Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, celebrated for his audacious tactics and mastery of mobile warfare. But even the greatest generals can fall to a well-executed strategy. In 1941 and 1942, the Allies crafted a plan that completely unraveled Rommel's momentum, culminating in battles that would define the campaign and his legacy. Rommel's Afrikakorps had pushed deep into Allied territory, gaining a reputation for speed and unpredictability. His ability to outmaneuver the British Eighth Army kept his opponents on edge, and his leadership inspired fierce loyalty among his troops. But beneath the victories lay an Achilles heel: his supply lines. North Africa's vast, barren landscape demanded immense resources, and Rommel was heavily reliant on stretched and vulnerable logistics networks. The Allies knew this, and they exploited it with devastating precision. The mastermind behind much of the Allied effort in North Africa was General Claude Auchinleck, later succeeded by Bernard Montgomery. Auchinleck recognized that a head-on confrontation with Rommel's highly mobile forces was unlikely to succeed. Instead, he emphasized a defensive approach, using deception, terrain, and superior intelligence to lure Rommel into overextending his forces. One of the most critical elements of this strategy was the use of ultra-intelligence. By intercepting German communications, the Allies had a detailed understanding of Rommel's plans and logistical struggles. This gave them a unique advantage, allowing them to anticipate his moves and disrupt his supply lines. British submarines and air forces targeted Axis convoys across the Mediterranean, sinking vital shipments of fuel, ammunition, and supplies. Without these resources, Rommel's forces were often operating on the brink of collapse. This effort to strangle Rommel's supply lines was no easy feat. The Mediterranean was a heavily contested battleground, with Axis and Allied forces vying for control of vital sea lanes. The Allied success in this theater was due in large part to their superior code-breaking capabilities, but also to their growing naval and air superiority. Convoys from Italy to North Africa were constantly under threat, and every ship sunk tightened the noose around Rommel's Afrikakorps. The lack of fuel, in particular, crippled Rommel's ability to conduct the fast, mobile operations that had become his trademark. As the Allies prepared for the decisive confrontations of late 1941 and early 1942, they also relied on psychological warfare and deception. One key example was Operation Crusader, where the Allies feigned retreats to lure Rommel into unfavorable positions. Rommel, ever confident in his ability to outmaneuver his opponents, often took the bait. This tactic required immense discipline and coordination among the Allied forces, as even a small mistake could have resulted in catastrophic losses. A pivotal moment came during the battles around Tobruk, a key port city in Libya. Tobruk had been a thorn in Rommel's side for months, as its Allied defenders repeatedly repelled his attempts to capture it. During Rommel's first attack, the Australian forces defending the area employed a strategy that showcased both their courage and cunning. When Rommel's panzers launched their assault, the Australians didn't engage immediately. Instead, they hunkered down in their trenches and dugouts, allowing the tanks to roll over them. This tactic was incredibly risky, but brilliantly effective. As the German tanks pushed forward, believing they had overrun the enemy positions, the Australians sprang into action. Emerging from their trenches, they launched a ferocious counterattack on the German infantry trailing behind the tanks. This unexpected assault threw the German forces into chaos. The Australians engaged in brutal hand-to-hand combat, using bayonets and sheer determination to overpower their surprised adversaries. The Germans, caught between their advancing panzers and the unyielding Australian defenders, suffered heavy losses. This tactic not only inflicted significant damage, but also disrupted the cohesion of Rommel's forces. The broader campaign around Tobruk demonstrated the importance of coordination and persistence. Allied forces used the rugged terrain and prepared defensive positions to their advantage, repeatedly frustrating Rommel's attempts to capture the city. Every failed assault drained his resources and morale, buying the Allies precious time to regroup and prepare for a larger counteroffensive. By mid-1942, the tide was beginning to turn. Rommel's forces, stretched thin and desperate for supplies, faced a reinvigorated Allied effort led by General Bernard Montgomery. Montgomery's approach was methodical and calculated, in stark contrast to Rommel's aggressive style. At the Second Battle of El Alamein, Montgomery unleashed a carefully planned assault that capitalized on the Allies' advantages in manpower, resources, and intelligence. The battle was marked by relentless artillery bombardments, coordinated infantry advances, and skillful use of armor. Rommel's forces fought valiantly, but they were outgunned and outmaneuvered. The Allies had learned from their earlier encounters with the Desert Fox, refusing to be drawn into his traps and steadily pressing their advantage. One of Montgomery's key innovations was the use of extensive minefields and defensive fortifications to channel Rommel's forces into kill zones. These tactics neutralized much of Rommel's mobility, forcing him to fight on terms dictated by the Allies. Additionally, the Allies' superiority in artillery and air support allowed them to inflict massive casualties on the Axis forces while minimizing their own losses. Perhaps the most significant aspect of the Allied victory at El Alamein was the role of logistics. Montgomery ensured that his troops were well supplied and supported, while Rommel's Afrikakorps struggled to maintain their fighting strength. The Allies' success in disrupting Axis supply lines earlier in the campaign paid dividends, leaving Rommel unable to sustain his forces in the face of overwhelming pressure. The defeat at El Alamein marked the beginning of the end for Rommel's campaign in North Africa. Over the following months, Allied forces continued to press their advantage, eventually driving the Axis out of the region entirely. The campaign in North Africa offers invaluable lessons about strategy, leadership, and the importance of adapting to the realities of war. Rommel's brilliance was undeniable, but his reliance on bold, high-risk maneuvers ultimately left him vulnerable to a more disciplined and resourceful opponent. The Allies' success was not just a matter of superior numbers, it was the result of careful planning, intelligence, and the courage of soldiers who turned desperate situations into triumphs. The Australian stand during Rommel's first attack is a testament to the ingenuity and bravery of those who fought in the harsh desert conditions. By hiding in their trenches and launching a counterattack at the perfect moment, they demonstrated how unconventional tactics could turn the tide of battle even against one of the most formidable generals of the war. Ultimately, the defeat of Rommel in North Africa was a turning point in World War II, shifting momentum in favor of the Allies. It was a victory built on strategy, resilience, and the determination of soldiers from across the Allied nations who refused to yield to the Desert Fox. The campaign stands as a reminder that even the most brilliant commanders can be undone by a well-executed plan, and the unbreakable spirit of those who stand in their way.